You don't need to be the authority. There just needs to be a little wrinkle in what you do that makes that person go, oh, that's the person for me.
And something else I remember just from the storyline, the story of Alex. I got a text from a friend, and he was like, the thing you just posted on Instagram, like, I don't know how you've done it, but I've never felt so compelled to comment on something. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Propane Business podcast. Today, Yusuf looks very different. No, I'm joking. Today, we are joined by a new member of the team, or it's not that new, but new podcast-wise new, called Alex.
Hello.
You have to say something so that it switches from on the video so that you show up on the video. But yeah, for people listening, that wouldn't have made any sense. But yeah, Alex is a relatively new member of the team here at Propane. And I mean, I don't even technically know how long, because it's been like on and off for 2 years or something.
Yeah,
right?
2 years, maybe 3 years. Who knows? This year is not even really a year. I don't know what this period of time of 20 years. So it could be 9 years at this point. But
we met in Cafe Nero in Newcastle. Yeah,
as all good business relationships start.
Yeah. And at the time, you were about to go to the US.
Yes,
which is where you are now.
Yes, it is.
To go to this like uni that no one's ever heard of to do this.
Yeah,
it's just a degree, which we'll talk about in a second. Yeah. And then you came back, and now full-time member team at Propanefitness.
Yes.
And this is your first. Everyone be like, wow, Alex has been rolled out to the front of the front. He's on the podcast. He's on YouTube.
Exciting.
But yeah, so I guess by way of introduction, I'm going to let you talk about some of the specific stuff you've done, because I know you've had direct experience in the fitness industry.
Yes.
You were a PT in Newcastle, right?
Yes.
At DW?
At DW Fitness, a beautiful, friendly organisation run by a really kind man.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure they still exist. Something's happened with DW.
Yeah, I don't think it's gone well for them during the pandemic. But, it's all good. But, so yes.
It's a tough time for commercial gyms in general, isn't it?
I think it's really difficult because they have no way of reaching people at home, and people have been at home, and that's essentially the big problem with it. And I think all of the appeal of what they bring, especially if you're a big gym, it's hard to be personable. Especially like having worked at one, a lot of it's about, the members in general, as opposed to, it's about trying to appear that you like the members and trying to appear that you know the members' needs, but not actually, like, in no way is it the same as being a person who actually, runs a business and talks to clients all the time, because they have 30, 40,000 people and they just can't do that.
Yeah.
And,
the model where if every member used the gym, it wouldn't work.
Yes.
It's this weird, they rely on people signing up for a year and then actually never coming.
Yeah.
And if they did, they couldn't operate. But yeah. So you went from offline fitness and took a total tangent, went to the US. And I'll let you talk about that for after I do this intro. And then still in the US, but now back working with us. So in the fitness industry, and you coach basically fitness and business clients, but primarily community manager is your role. And a lot of the stuff, if you've been following YouTube, a lot of the improved creative, a lot of the Instagram improved creative that you see sharing, that's all Alex's creative flair and things like that. With more stuff to come.
Sprinkled in there.
Creative flair. Yeah.
So in terms of kind of backtracking to how I ended up, one in Newcastle being a PT, and then being in America, and then working for Propane. So before I moved to Newcastle, I did an undergrad degree in creative writing in Northwest London at Brunel University. I played basketball there as well, and I'd learned to be a PT beforehand. I'd taken my level 3 and all of that. So I'd done that before I went to university. Went to university, went through that, played basketball, enjoyed that, got out at the end of it being okay, I want to, do this writing thing. I want to tell stories and stuff, but it's not necessarily the most money friendly thing when you're 21 years old. Like, I think most writers publish their first book when they're 30. So obviously there's a 9-year gap that you can't magically make that go away. Like, it's writing, especially when it comes to like fiction and books like that. It's a craft that you really have to work. You know, the whole 10,000 hours thing. You know, it really is that. Like, there is no way. There's no like life hack for that in terms of creating a piece of art that is so meticulously constructed that it lasts beyond like a year or beyond, you know, just the first. You know, it's very different to a blog post, a book, a piece of art, or whatever. So there's basically a certain time that I'm going to have to put into that. So then I was like, okay, what am I doing now? Well, I enjoy the fitness side of things. I enjoy my training. I've got the qualification. Let me try and do something in that. So I moved up to Newcastle because it was a fun city. We played some basketball up there. Got a great basketball team up there as well. But it's also just a fun place to be as like a 21-year-old. So moved up there. Worked at DW, like just got the job there, kind of looked around, worked there. Had a mixed experience. Like, I enjoyed training people. But I think the actual being a PT for that company specifically was not the most enjoyable experience in terms of the relationship. I felt that, like, the power dynamic. I mean, I'm quite like a self-motivated person anyway, and I don't like too many constraints being placed on me. I'll kind of kick out at that. And I think there was certainly elements of that with DW, or at least with, I think it's a mixture in terms of what I was willing to do in terms of being like pushy with sales, or like trying to make clients work with me as a PT, and my own sensibilities towards being salesy or being, you know, whatever. And also just being too young to kind of understand the bigger picture of things, with just how it operated in the gym. So I kind of found mixed results with that, but through there, met some people that knew you guys at Propane, listened to the podcast, was like, oh, this seems to make a lot more sense for kind of what I like, the kind of sensibilities that I'm naturally, you know, into, as it were. So I reached out to you guys and was like, hey, I've got this writing degree from Brunel. I'd love to help you guys with some content creation. So I did a bit of that on and off for a little while. And then after a year, basically I was like, I still want to take this writing further. So I applied to go to NYU and to Columbia University in New York. I got into Columbia University, which I was very shocked at. Didn't get into NYU, which is strange because of, I think Columbia is like the 3rd best ranking university in America or something. And it's really highly ranked in terms of the creative writing program. So went there, spent 2 years basically really dialing in on the writing in a way that is, it's like, I don't know, you know, when you see that noticeable leap in whatever field where you're like, oh, this is really how it's done, you know. And I think my undergrad experience to my master experience, although my undergrad at Brunel, definitely if you're into writing and watching this, go there, it's amazing. But taking that next step and really just the intensity was insane. It was like going from doing like 3 sets of 10 to doing 10 sets of 10 every day. Like, it was insane. It was like that. Well, similar to, I think, Yusuf's experience with, you know, the doctor stuff. It was like trying to catch water from a fire hose. It's like, there's so much going on. But I think it was, you know, it was a incredibly useful experience. It taught me so much more about kind of writing, and basically bringing back to Propane Fitness and to Propane Business, and kind of running a fitness business. Storytelling is so essential to how businesses operate, especially in an online space. And in a broader sense, storytelling is basically one of the 2 main ways that we interact with the world as human beings. So I kind of want to talk about that today, in a broader context and in kind of a fitness business context. So yes, that's
a snapshot of the last 3 years.
3 or 4 years, yes.
4 years.
It feels longer, but I mean, it's, yeah, so much. I've been all over the shop. I mean, I spent quarantine in Florida, and now I'm in Savannah, Georgia. So every day I wake up and I'm like, what is going on? How have I got here? But it's great.
Wait, on like daily calls with Alex, like one day he's in New York,
yeah,
and then the next call you're in Florida, and then like God knows really tomorrow, maybe somewhere else.
Who knows?
So,
well, actually,
yeah,
2 weeks time, North Carolina. So
there you go. But the thing I was thinking about actually before we which isn't really that relevant, but I think it's just quite a cool like bit of information, is I remember reading in I think it's the 4 Hour Work Week, something from Tim Ferriss, where he was like, he talked about how he started his supplement business.
Yeah.
I think it's called Brain Quicken.
Yeah, something like that.
You read much Tim Ferriss stuff?
Yes. Yeah, I'm fairly familiar.
Yeah.
Timmy boy.
Fairly familiar. Most people are.
Yeah.
Big Tim. He spoke about how like he got into that world by like literally just saying, going around and like offering to work places for free.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh well, that'll never work. Like, who would ever say yes to that? How you would never go from that into working full time or being involved in something. But that is exactly what you did with us, isn't it?
It is. I ferriced you. I absolutely
you ferriced us. I ferriced it, and I was being ferriced. I didn't even realize I was being ferriced. That's how good it was. Yeah. So Alex like basically said, as you said, I think you were like, it was the summer, wasn't it? Was it the summer before going away?
The summer before going away to Colombia. So moving away to New York, he basically eased off of things with DW. Newcastle is a wonderfully cheap city to live in for basically the same that you get in most other cities. And like personal training, because obviously the way that the hourly charge works, you can kind of pay rent quite easily with very few clients. So that's kind of where I was at when I reached out to you guys, is kind of low level personal training still, but had quite a bit of free time to pursue some passions and, reach out to you.
One of the first things, so then you basically you like interned with us, then it was part-time, now it's full-time.
Binned you off for a while after.
Binned me up, went and worked other small insignificant places, and then came back here. And yes. I don't know whether you can you say what you did?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can. So okay. Whilst at Columbia, sort of going into my final, so it was a 2-year program, and the way it worked at Columbia was 2 semesters a year, as opposed to, I think it's 3 in England, isn't it? But anyways, so yeah. The first 2 semesters were still working with Propane, and I also worked at a rape crisis center on campus. And then I continued doing that in my second year. And then in the final semester of my second year, also started working on a TV show for Comedy Central, helping out with some of the script stuff with that, helping out kind of source some video and do some other sort of more admin sides of the production side of things, which was really interesting. I'm technically still doing that, but obviously everything has stopped for the last 7 months. I don't know if I can talk about when refilming is going to start, so I'm not going to. But yeah, so I'm technically still doing that, but having, the master's full time plus the job at the Rape Crisis Center plus the Comedy Central thing meant I needed to put you guys on the back burner for a while, for which I apologize.
I think it's in the industry, it's known as pieing someone off.
Pieing someone off. Yeah, that's the
something like that.
That's the official
like what it would go down on as a on your CV, it'd be like pied off.
But objections, that's very like 2000s. Pie off. That's the new one. That's the new term. I think if you use an objection, if you're working with the wrong kind of business metrics.
Number of pie offs.
Number of pie offs. But yes.
But yeah, so and then that led into working with us now.
Yes.
And something else I remember just from the storyline, the story of Alex,
yes.
Was something I got a text from a friend who actually was like part of the like founding team of Propane like 10 years ago, called Dan. And he sent me this message and he was like, the thing you just posted on Instagram, like, I don't know how you've done it, but I've never felt so. He's like pretty blasé about social media. Like, he doesn't get involved in arguments or anything. Yeah. But he was like, I've never felt so compelled to comment on something. and then he was like thinking about that and thinking about that. And he was like, how have they managed to do that? And there was like a run of those where that was consistently happening. I can't remember what it was. It was something about like the male-female dynamic in a gym.
Yeah, it was women don't care about your advice in the gym. That was it. Yeah. But that caused a shitstorm. Like, and that's just, again, Alex just coming in, just storytelling his way through our Instagram. 80 comments on it. It was insane. Crazy. So I think that was probably one of the first things you worked on for us, was that. Yes. Like turning articles into creative, like all the articles and content we've got into like, what is the core idea behind that? And then
turning them into those.
No,
And
yeah.
annoying half the internet. But yeah.
If you can annoy
yeah,
but you'll probably make yourself appeal.
Win over the other half. Yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? And that's what I think people don't like about moving online is you have to at some point piss someone off, basically.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's the whole world you're exposing yourself to. And there's also, I mean, just in terms of way stuff works algorithmically, you need to take a stance. You can't muddle in the middle, else it kind of just gets lost. I mean, it depends on the platform. But when it's for short form stuff, and by short form, I mean like really short form, like Instagram or like a tweet, not like a short article. That you can be a bit more nuanced than that, but even within that, I mean, headlines and stuff like that of short articles, again, that kind of still needs to take a stance and be fairly out there, not out there, but you know what I mean? It needs to have the ability to annoy someone or grab someone. And I think the idea is that if it's going to grab someone, it probably might annoy someone as well.
Like if it's like 5 sensible ideas for fat loss, nobody cares.
5 gradual and moderate approaches to achieving reasonable goals that aren't ludicrous.
Without overstretching yourself.
Without overstretching yourself and understanding that there will be ups and downs along the way. The article.
This is like, the definitive article. This is like tweet keto is stupid. And somebody somewhere will get a bit annoyed.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Just before we continue, we are definitely recording.
Yes, we are.
Cool.
It says
it's just there is nothing worse. Oh yeah, so it does in the corner. So it does. I'm not used to not being the one that is the recorder.
The power's been taken.
I know. I'm not the host.
I could just pause it.
Well, yeah, and then just literally waste time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what we're going to talk about today, and I think what is Alex's superpower is, I mean, you refer to it as storytelling, but I think it's quite hard. I mean, I know the importance of it, mainly because I like pretty much every kind of mainstream marketing course, book, coach, it all comes back to this idea of like the narrative in your marketing and the story arc from point A to point B, and how you basically convince someone or win someone over. But it's probably quite difficult if I'm like sat listening to this and I'm an offline personal trainer, I'm working in DW in Newcastle or somewhere similar.
Yeah. And
I'm sat thinking like, here are these guys telling me that I need to use storytelling to my advantage.
Yeah.
So give us like an example or like a synthesis of what is it that you mean when you say storytelling? You don't mean like once upon a time, do you?
No. Yeah. I was literally going to use that example. So yeah, it's
okay.
Where I think a lot of people do get lost in the whole storytelling or narrative or, however it wants to be phrased. What I mean by that is just the kind of the information they piece together to make kind of a logical argument within themselves. Or if you're writing it, the logical argument you make piecing some information together. And the way this works in terms of, so storytelling can be visual, it can be auditory, it can be writing as well. But I think the big thing that people often miss with the marketing is that you're not just trying to tell your best story as like, this is the story of my life as a personal trainer. You're trying to basically make the person that you're trying to sell to help or sell your service to, you're trying to make them understand how you fit within their story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Like that's really where, so say for example, you're on a gym floor and if someone's own personal story is I'm going to the gym and I'm going to put my headphones on and not talk to anyone and I don't want to be interrupted. As a personal trainer approaching them, you've got no chance. You know what I mean? You've got, they don't want to talk to you. Whereas if you're someone that's a bit more open or a bit like confused about the gym, or, if you have these beliefs that like, oh, I'm going to the gym, I vaguely want to get in shape or I vaguely have these goals. As a personal trainer, then what you can do is approach them and tell your own story of like how you fit into their narrative of I'm confused then you're like, oh, I'm not confused. I can help you with that confusion. This is how I can help you overcome that. And the way that you tell stories in your business is really, I mean, people are just very self-absorbed. So like just basically reflecting their own story back at them also is really a really helpful way to think about it as well. So for example, so that's why a keto-ish nonsense tweet is so triggering, because people have this story that keto is kind of who they are. It's their personality. It's this narrative that they tell themselves about like, oh, this is the way, and they kind of place themselves on a pedestal, or they place themselves on, even if it's not on a pedestal, it still becomes core of like their belief system. And saying keto is bad is telling a very different story to the one that they're telling themselves, which is why they get triggered. However, other people who have had bad experiences with keto are going to be like, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by storytelling. And that's what I mean with how it interacts in terms of a personal training sense, is that it's about getting the stories that you tell to match up with the stories that your prospective clients tell about themselves.
So this is, I mean, it's part of the conversation of like, who is your target market and how do you attract them?
Yes.
And I think everybody thinks that starts and finishes with, well, I work with Dave, who's 31 and works in IT and likes football. And it's like, right, done. So then I'll just run a Facebook ad to that person and sell them a fat loss program and think that because I've done that, suddenly there's no more competition because no one else is going after someone called Dave. No, versus like, because what I think what I realized was with this stuff, I realized that I was being convinced of things by someone almost telling me a story about how they used to think how I feel.
Yeah.
Or they used to feel how I feel, or they used to think what I think now. And then they tried a few things and they didn't work. And then they kind of made some changes and suddenly they got this result. And now they're here and actually it's linked to this thing.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm like, oh, well, it must be that. Versus someone like pulling up their soapbox and standing on it and like ringing the bell and going like, listen to me, this is the only thing you can do and nothing else works. People like shut us up and don't listen, versus this sort of gradually taking someone by the hand and taking them through a story to help them arrive at the same conclusion.
No, exactly. And well, I think it's very difficult to say succinctly because it's quite, so looking at our business as a whole, or even like Propane Fitness, like the storytelling of Propane Fitness, one, it's changed and altered over time, but that's natural in the growth of any business. But it's also, it's such a large thing in terms of, so it's what you and Yusuf look like, number one, like just the visual side of things, like the fact that you guys are in shape is already telling a certain story out there. It's, but the fact that that is there, and then you add in like, even like the fact that you lifted certain numbers with deadlift, that's arbitrary generally, but in someone that
completely,
or in someone that has told themselves they value lifting heavy weights, they can look at you and be like, that number is more than my number. My life would be vastly improved if I got to that number. This guy seems to know about it. So that's one arm of it, is like the visual stuff, the actual proof of what you're doing. That it's all telling a story. I think that's the thing that it's not just like one piece of content that tells a story. It's really your overall business is telling a story about who you are in the world, what you provide to the world, the value that you put out there. And when you, I don't know if it's easier if you take a step back and look at it holistically, but I think it becomes more natural. If that makes sense. If your process is, oh, I really just need to be authentic. Well, this is the big word, and it's a buzzword in self-help at the moment, is authenticity. You don't actually need to be authentic, but it's the easiest way to tell a story that is very nuanced and very like, it has a lot to it. Because if you just go with the truth, or at least what you think is the truth, because our memories are actually just constructed stories. But if you go with what you think is the truth, which is how you live life anyway, then that's probably going to resonate with some people. And you're also not going to get tripped up overthinking like, oh, how do I angle this thing that actually happened to me? Like, it actually happened to you and you can just tell it as you told it. Sorry, Johnny.
So the authenticity thing, I think, is, rather than thinking I need to be suit and tie, professional, never swear, never do anything that like someone might see and think, well, I'm not going to, and like, there are some examples of this where I have to, and Alex and I have spoken about this, where I've had to like rein Yusuf in, because he does do some things sometimes on Instagram where I think it does stray beyond that. But like generally speaking, just being yourself will attract people of a similar mindset. Like if someone sees Yusuf doing something a bit risque and thinks that's funny, like yesterday he uploaded a video of him in a sleeping bag doing a Q&A.
I
like
watched all 9 minutes. Watched all 9 minutes of Yusuf in a hot sleeping bag. And I went,
you know, the best thing about it, have you seen so we got a message from the company saying you should be wearing clothes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's very Yusuf.
But that is Yusuf thinking, what would I do anyway? This, I know, I'll just put it on the internet. Easy peasy. But yeah, like versus like if Yusuf was to sort of sit down really professionally and sort of put on this front, firstly, you've got to remember to keep that up. And like telling a lie, eventually you contradict yourself or, you know, forget that that's the person you are.
Yeah.
And then secondly, the people you attract are attracted to that rather than what you're like anyway. So then all client work, all content, everything you do has to be upholding that version of you rather than just the version of you that,
as opposed to, well, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, when I said you don't need to be authentic, it's still probably the best way to run something and live life. But like, you don't, you know, it's weird. It's very weird with Instagram, for example. Like if you look at, because it's sort of authentic. It's like semi-authentic, where it's like, I think the thing with the storytelling part of that is just basically doubling down on what people seem to be drawn towards with you. Does that make sense? So like, although Yusuf probably would be in the sleeping bag if the camera is on or not.
Exactly.
Like,
he just wouldn't be doing a Q&A. That's the only difference.
Yes. But for example, so say we're going back to this tweet about women don't care about your opinion on their training program. That's not necessarily something that you'd wake up and think, I need to say this today. The world needs to know. At all. But I think in terms of then you look at, what do people like about us? It's kind of raw honesty and like empathy. That is something that's kind of the more extreme version of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's taking an idea that you would have, but wouldn't necessarily like go down to the shops and say
exactly
in public for no reason.
Yeah.
So it's all part of this. I suppose that links up to like, what is my story? I think what you said there is like probably the most important thing for someone to kind of start thinking about is, if I'm going to try and get a client, they have to see like their confusion or where they are in their journey in me.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's a very hard sell to get them to trust you. So then it's like, well, what would I say that might convince that person that I've been where they are, or how might I agree with them, or how might I overturn a belief that they think is true?
Yeah.
And get their attention and then take them on this story to ultimately work with me, which is basically just all of marketing and sales.
Yeah.
It comes back to telling stories. Yeah.
Exactly.
So this is why.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, so it's also, I mean, another big thing about marketing is sort of like standing out from other people a little bit as well. Which is why we're, you know, in the Propane Business program, we're so heavy on like, have a niche, you know, really understand your niche. And it can be something very specific in terms of like the mechanics of what you deliver. It can be something very specific in terms of who you are exactly targeting, or, you know, it can be either of those things, but there needs to be a specificity to what you're delivering, or at least how you're delivering it, or how you're telling people about it. Because there's so much free stuff out there anyway. And there's also, I mean, you know, if you're trying to go up against Gymshark, like I'm not, you know, good luck.
Yeah.
Like that's
well,
and they're the people who are targeting. Actually, the Gymshark thing is very interesting. I don't know if you saw the controversy, but when they posted a photo of someone who didn't have 8% body fat, and people lost their minds. Like they were angry. They were like, "Oh, I'm never buying from Gymshark again." And that, like, in different photos, they are still saying they're never buying from Gymshark again. Like that. And like, if you want to talk about the power of storytelling and like the power of like your own story, that's a piece of fabric. That's all that is. It's like, there is nothing that inherently makes you strong, lean, or anything about a piece of fabric. But people have told themselves that this piece of fabric represents low body fat and high muscle mass. It doesn't. And also people have told themselves that because of the way that Gymshark have told their own story. But
Yeah.
and I think in terms of a business decision, if I'm going like cynical on Gymshark, like they are big enough now and they have enough brand power that they can pivot within a market and don't need to just do like elite. They will benefit more from targeting people that don't have abs than they will now targeting the pretty small percentage of the human population that really, really like, I mean, that's the thing that I think we also get sometimes a bit deluded with in terms of the fact that, you know, me, you and Yusuf are all on kind of extremer ends, not quite extreme because we're not all taking roids, but it's still a fairly, it's probably like 80th percentile, maybe 90th of like human behavior and intention to be lean and strong. Like, so from Gymshark's perspective, they're now a household name, and if they can change their story to this is for everyone that's, you know, trying to get in shape, that's like they've like quadrupled their market.
But that's where the growth is for them, isn't it? It's not like selling more to the people who already have the Gymshark leggings. It's like the people who don't or wouldn't think that they can.
And also, I think a large enough portion of the people who do have abs are not going to be unreasonable douchebags. So but it's very interesting to see.
So the thing of like just getting in the media, like being on the front page of the media, whether for good or bad reasons. Sometimes just, especially if like look at Elon Musk and Tesla and SpaceX, right? Like there was a period of time where Elon Musk was doing the most ridiculous shit. Like I'm sure he called someone a pedophile or something.
Yeah.
The guy who helped the diver who helped the kids in Thailand.
Oh yeah, the diver like saved some children.
I know. And he just like called it, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he just like came out and said something, and then he like has been accused of like influencing the share price. But then when you just look at Tesla's progress, in spite of all that, you think, well, like, is there a part of that where just being in the media consistently has helped them? And I think with Gymshark, like here we are talking about Gymshark.
Yeah, exactly.
So but yeah, I agree. Like their story, and there's a similar thing with SBD and powerlifting. I know they're nowhere near as big of a brand, but they made powerlifting, I think anyway, more like accessible and like trendy and cool to be part of, because they like gave athletes SBD kit, and the SBD kit, you could only get certain bits of SBD kit if you competed for the British team or the national team. And suddenly it became this, like, there was a story behind powerlifting. And
it's
figures in powerlifting. Yeah. But just from 3 letters on a single.
Oh, right? No, you've drank the Kool-Aid on SBD. But they're in yours.
I have, yeah. Well, so I remember it was basically the period of time I was most active in powerlifting went from when SBD didn't exist. And then like the next year, the same competition, everyone was wearing SBD knee sleeves. And then a year after that, everyone was wearing an SBD singlet. And you're like, what are they, like, how are they managing to do that? So impressive. But Gymshark's the same, right?
Yeah.
Like you go into a gym in the UK, especially, and find that there'll be someone in there with something Gymshark on at the time.
I mean, so even in Savannah, Georgia, seeing people out running in Gymshark.
Really?
It's wild. But anyway, I mean, in terms of potential personal trainers, the considerations of Gymshark are not your considerations. I do want to say that. You don't want
to...
You know, because there are some lessons you can take and some lessons that you kind of could push away. Like you're not trying to go mass market because you don't have $1 billion company, basically. Like you don't have the ad spend, and even then, so they were still in a niche until clearly this pivot slightly into trying to appeal to a different kind of audience. And like, if you look at where Gymshark started, like very, very niche, and through that built a little bit more.
And it's because I think people are like, well, if niching doesn't mean that there's fewer people competing with me, why should I go after a niche? And it's just back to what you were saying. It's like someone has to resonate with something about you. And it's far easier to resonate with one person than two or three, or like one person in a specific situation. So like some of the most successful people in propane business probably do the opposite to what a lot of people would think, and that they work with a really specific person.
Yeah.
And the knee-jerk reaction is...
This is a massive difference between working on a gym floor and working online. Is on a gym floor, there's only maybe 300, depending on the size of the gym, but maybe like, I think the members database is probably 3,000. Then the amount of people that actually come regularly, 1,000 maybe. And then within that, the people that are open to PT, maybe you have 100 that aren't already working with a PT, that aren't already. So you need to be a catch-all. You need to be adaptable. You need to be able to pivot to whatever their needs are specifically, because there's only 100 of them, and that's how you make your money. With the internet, there's 6 billion, or I don't know what the number of the internet is right now because of how many people have access to it, but it's in the billions, which is a number so large that like the human brain can't actually comprehend what that is.
That number, yeah.
Like
even just Facebook's 2 billion, right?
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
Over 2 billion.
Exactly. So
then people say things like, "Oh, my target market aren't on Facebook." Like, come on, man. Like, really? Like, there's really no one in your target market.
And the only reason they wouldn't be on Facebook is that like they would be on a different social media platform. Or they're like 15 years old and like don't target 15-year-olds with personal training generally. I mean, but like,
like they're too young to have a smartphone, perhaps. Would be one of the only reasons.
There's very limited people alive, or enough for you. If you're a business owner listening to this, there are enough people.
So that's the other conversation is like, you go from the offline situation into online. You're told to niche down and pick a specific person and create this narrative of your journey and try and appeal to one specific person. They're like, yeah, but like, I don't know enough of those people.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, that's not the point. But secondly, let's say you got 30, like of a market of, let's say 100 million people who are of that category. You know, how hard is that on a percentage basis? We aren't talking about becoming the next Instagram to make this work. So the numbers do really put things in perspective when you run them.
It's just insane. And I think because we're so, social media is still early in terms of people's, and also like just in terms of the way the human brain works, like Facebook's not been accounted for in evolution yet. But like the access to people that we have is absolutely insane. Or even like the life that I've lived, where I've like bopped from, Southeast England up to London, up to the north, across to New York, down to Florida, up to Savannah, Georgia. Like that's not possible without the internet. That's not possible without those kind of things. And just I could train a client in Dubai now, like that would be fine. Like, and that's wild. And like that just didn't happen before. So I think the industry is so unfamiliar with that there's so much like grandfathered in practices from the gym floor days of we only have certain members that we can get. Whereas like to make the same amount that you might make, offline, it's probably like 20 people or maybe 30 people, depending on how many people you're doing and what you're charging, obviously. But it's such a low proportion, as you were saying, of that market. You don't need to be the authority. There just needs to be a little wrinkle in what you do that makes that person go, oh, that's the person for me.
And most of that is the person's story, right?
Yeah.
It's the person's background and the way they come across. And like, if I always imagine this world where like you're going after one person and that person has like 4 people on their social media that they might work with.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, well, who's going to win that battle? It's the person who says something of like, oh, this morning I was this, and then I was thinking about this thing that happened to me and I was worried about this. And someone watches that and it goes, oh yeah, that's me.
Exactly.
Or like, yeah, I've had exactly that, right? You know what? I'm just going to pick them.
Yeah.
And that comes from just knowing your target market, knowing exactly what they're thinking and what they're wanting and how you can interact with them, rather than thinking, how do I get 1,000 people to buy my fat loss ebook? Think, how do I get 25, 30 people to work with me on a recurring basis?
Exactly. No, that's 100% it. And it's just, it's again, like, if you think of what you are as a personal trainer in this person's story, so the person you're trying to train is always the main character in their story. Like that's all. If you look at it from just like a story time perspective, like they're always the main character, and they're on an adventure and they're trying to make the most of their life. You just have to be the really helpful person. That's all you are to them. The really helpful person that gives them the wisdom, or if you frame it in the context of like, you could be the Mr. Miyagi to their Daniel-san, or like, there's so many ways. If you look at kind of the relationship between a trainer and a client it's very different to a business and a person. Like they are different things. And I think that's something to be very conscious of as well, is that yes, Gymshark is great, but Gymshark isn't a personal brand. Gymshark is a clothing brand that's like, it's not like your leggings talk to you every day. It's not like your leggings give you feedback after a week or whatever it is. It's a different relationship. So understanding that the value of who you are as a person is so much more significant with a business like that than with just a goods business where you're just selling an object. Even
Gymshark though, like honestly, I think one of the main reasons I pay such close attention is because of Ben Francis.
Yeah, but you're also a business owner. You're a business-minded person.
Yeah, so I guess like I'm very impressed by him, the way he runs Gymshark. Like, I mean, I can't imagine you open your laptop and inside, like on the screen, is what's happening with a company that's just been valued at that amount, and the emails he must get, and the things that reach him because no one else could solve it. Like, you just have massive problems to deal with every day.
That's how he fits into your personal story. I think most people that wear Gymshark leggings aren't like, I wonder what Ben Francis is up to today. And if they, but
yeah, you're right.
But it's still about, it's about understand. So Ben Francis, you've never met Ben Francis, you don't know him personally, but he's clearly, just in you as a business owner, has provided enough value with the story he's told about his journey that if Ben Francis released a training tomorrow, I wouldn't hear from you for the next 4 weeks. Like, you'd be gone. He's off.
Yeah, you're right. As long as it was relevant.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not interested in, but you're dead right. Like if, and everyone has these people. Like I have these people in fitness, in business, in like Tim Ferriss is a good example.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people have someone like that, like a Tim Ferriss character, where that book's had a big impact on their life, and that fits into their story, and he's like part of it. Even though I'm sure that, the thing of like never meet your heroes in person, like I'm sure if you spent a week with Tim Ferriss, it probably wouldn't be what you'd think. You'd be like, he's just a guy.
He goes to a coffee shop. He does some LSD. He's tripping now. Like,
now he's writing a book.
Book.
And
he's having
what a surprise.
Girlfriend. He's weird in arguments. Oh no.
Yeah, and that would be how it would be. So that's why it's better to just occasionally listen to his podcast and read a book and have him be part of your story.
But then, I mean,
so what is
the great thing about having a personal brand is that you can put that best foot forward at all times.
Yeah.
And that's another part where the storytelling comes into it. And why I was saying that Instagram's kind of half honest. Mm-hmm. Because Tim Ferriss isn't posting a podcast of him bickering with his girlfriend. Because
I think he should though.
You're zagging.
It's the sort of thing.
You're a very
it's the sort of thing
market kind of person though.
Well, Tim uploaded like drunk Q&As. Like he drank. He just sits drinking tequila and calls his audience. Brilliant.
That's authenticity though. That's very much like and again, that's the thing with a personal brand. I think people get too caught up in like, this is how big companies do sales. So this is how he, as a personal trainer who's a person, should do sales. That they're not the same thing. And again, it comes back to like when I go to Tesco's, I mean, I'm not really in it for the cashier experience. That's not where they fit in.
To handle your objections.
Yeah, I thought like,
You
oh,
thought about
this melon could be 145 instead of 159. Can we do something on this? Like, no.
have you thought about the finest option, sir? That's out my price range. Well, what do you mean by that? Like,
No,
how can we make this work for you? Yeah, it would just be a pain.
But there are some nuggets in there in terms of there is a customer journey in a supermarket, and they are very specific with how they set out a supermarket in terms of what you see first, what they're trying to shift, how they can get the stuff that's loss leading, sell as little as possible of that, and there's conscious ways of doing that, and then that is something to really focus on when say constructing. What's the equivalent of a brick and mortar in place online? It's your website, it's your social media profiles, it's all of this kind of stuff. And being really cognizant of the customer journey as they interact with you or your business is incredibly important. And again, fits into storytelling. Like there's a way with the online stuff that you can make it a pretty exciting journey for someone through a myriad of different techniques. And that's where you kind of want to get with it. There's ways of building up exclusivity. That's one method of doing it, of telling a story about, oh, there's only 5 spaces left in this program. But that's a very like blunt way of doing that. There's other ways of like doing that in a much larger, broader way of telling that story. That's like, swamped with clients this week. It's great. That's more subtle, which again, that's something that we kind of dive into a bit more in the program. But like, there's ways of being subtle with storytelling, and there's ways of being very overt, and they work at different points in the journey. So for example, with Tesco, it's a Tesco because it has a massive sign that says Tesco. Like, you know what that is. And it's very obvious. So that's an important consideration, is like, it needs to be clear what it is, what you are when you're out there. It can't be like a muddled message. However, once you get in the door of Tesco, it's a little bit more subtle the way they do it. There's some like signs to like, oh, here's cereal and milk, but then it's a little bit more subtle in the way that they will place stuff on the shelves. Now, I'm not an expert in supermarket positioning, but it's just knowing that it's something that is considered, that the placement of different things and the way that you go through the shop is considered, is something that definitely makes sense to think about, because online can be really abstract and intimidating, and it can also be overwhelming and like, oh, I've got this Instagram page, but then Facebook, but then Snapchat, but then the website, and then I'll deliver this program, and it feels like you're juggling. Whereas understanding that what you're doing is really just fitting into that person's journey and optimizing for their experience within their journey. So they are someone that wants to change something within their life and get a result at the end of it. Well, actually, they just want a result. They probably don't want to change that much. You've got to convince them that they need to change. But they want a result, and your value is in them understanding that you are the best person to deliver that result to them, and then to actually deliver the result as well.
So here's a story, just to go very meta. Here's a story that I often tell about this to communicate this idea. Nice. And this legit happened, right? So in Venice, with Becca, my girlfriend, we're walking down. If anyone's ever been to Venice, you'll have kind of had this experience. You're like walking down a narrow street, and basically there's just like restaurant, like loads of people basically trying to capitalize on the traffic, right? Which is just the people going to and from. And it's very much like a newsfeed, because basically everybody is standing outside their restaurant, waving a menu in your face, talking about like the features. So it's like, oh, blah, 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 garlic bread, blah, 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 pasta, right? It's just exactly the same shit, like over and over and over again. And you just become numb to it.
Yeah.
And there was one guy who was basically here when he said it. He was like, are you looking for delicious Italian food? And I was like, oh, fuck you. Like, because like, yes, obviously I am. Like that, of course that's what I'm doing. Yeah. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. So I was like, yes. And he was like, all right, okay. And then like gave us a free sample, and then gave us a second free sample, and then like sat us at the table. Like before I really knew what was happening, I was just in this restaurant. I was just like, and I like sat there thinking about online sales funnels, much to my girlfriend's frustration. But so that
romantic.
That's like, over a candlelit dinner, me just thinking, I wonder what his conversion rate is with. But yeah, so that's an example of a guy who was like just doing the opposite And I watched him do this with multiple people, right? And it consistently worked for him. But he's just saying the thing that not everybody else is saying, which is like my free fat loss ebook, my recipe book, my recipe book, my recipe book.
Yeah,
He's just saying, crazy results with my free fat loss diet guide. Like just saying something slightly different that is, meeting people where they're at, basically. What are they there for? And then I think that the 14-day challenge, which is what we teach pretty much everyone in the program, is like walking around Tesco. Well, not quite the same, right? It's like if you're on a high street looking for something, then you're looking for that thing, right? You don't need to be convinced that you're there to buy that thing. That's the same with fat loss and muscle gain. It's not, I don't need someone to tell me that that's my goal. I know that's my goal. Yeah. I'm looking for where to buy it from. You don't go to a shop and buy the thing you were there to buy and come out of it feeling like you've been scammed. Do you? You're like, fuck, like someone's really rinsed me there. Like it's, well, I was here for that. I bought that. I feel like I made the right decision. And that's just the journey around the shop and the options. And, you associate certain things with the brand, like Tesco's trustworthy, every little helps, feels like they're on my side, so, and then it's a very just as expected experience. And I think what everyone else is trying to do in the fitness industry is be the guy outside the restaurant waving the garlic bread offer in your face.
Or a club promoter.
Exactly.
Yeah, on it tonight. £2 shots. Come on inside. It's packed. And there's like 4 people in there.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. Oh God, I've been on the pointy end of so many of those offers.
Yeah.
There's
Newcastle's fun for it. There's a lot of promoters.
So another story. I remember in Las Vegas this time, this guy giving me all this speech, right, on the strip about how he ran this night and it was the best ever and a discount, blah, blah, blah.
I'd love to hear about the Vegas days.
Been twice. I've got some brilliant stories. But he was wearing this really big gold watch. It was like, so I remember the watch, right? And this guy sold us this nightclub and we went to this nightclub and it was absolutely terrible. So everybody had to wear name badges and you were like forced to walk around and introduce yourself. It was honestly one of the worst things I've ever been to. So we left that and we went to another nightclub and I saw a guy standing at the bar with a huge gold watch on. And I was like, hey, look, there's that gold watch again. Like everyone in Vegas must have these gold watches. And the guy turned around and I was like, hold on a minute, mate. What are you doing over here? So that prime example, bait and switch. And that's how most fit pros sell online coaching.
Yeah. With big gold watches.
With big gold watches on a Las Vegas strip.
Exactly. No, I mean,
so there you go. A lot of underlying resentment there. Bring up some painful memories.
There's some feelings for you.
Yeah.
Some painful parts of your story. Okay, what if I could tell you, Johnny, you'll never have a bad club experience again?
Are you about to sell me a club experience? Is this? Am I about to have what I've just described done back to me?
Right, online clubbing. The result you want's a good night out. I've got this app that is basically a network of different clubs. And I text the managers each night being like, oh, is it a decent night out, mate? And they're honest with me. So I'll send you to the club. You in? Well, that's a great app. I'm leaving Propane. I'm doing that.
I don't even have to leave. I don't have to leave. I can just be at home, but be in the club at the same time.
Yeah.
And then
live stream.
I don't have to get an Uber.
They come to your house.
I can just I can just like prepare food, takeaway food to have here as well.
That's prepared as caterers. You're fine.
I'm in.
Beautiful.
Objection handling. So what is someone's listening to this and they're thinking like, right, I need to go to Venice, I need to go to Vegas, nightclub apps. But what is one thing that probably right now, I'm guessing if someone's still listening, they're either currently doing some kind of online stuff or they're thinking about it, they're kind of dipping their toes. What's like the low hanging fruit with applying this stuff? Is it like an about me? Is it like changing my marketing messages or thinking about my brand?
I think if you've never spent time considering your niche or your brand, I think that's a starting point. I don't know if it's the lowest hanging fruit, but I think it's a real starting point of drilling into who you are, what you want to be delivering, who you like serving, who you like working with, if there's an ideal client base, who you've seen success with in the past. If you're just starting out, again, just kind of who you want to serve, your own story, your own pain points. And like really focusing on that to start with. And then if it's terms like a storytelling and a marketing perspective, I would just like play around with it and have fun with it a little bit. I think that's generally where you find a sweet spot, because if you're playing around and having fun, then you're being genuine. Also, I mean, you're also probably not big enough to do significant damage to your like reputation. Like, obviously, don't be just tweeting out really hot takes about, you know, very sensitive issues. Don't do that. But, you know, try and play around a little bit with either, so on social media, taking a stance, for example, trying to get involved in the conversation, and really just kind of even just trying to see everything from a customer experience perspective, trying to look at your website with the eyes of, I'm someone within the niche that I'm trying to serve. What have I seen before? Who have I, you know, what messaging have I seen before? How does this differ? Is this the same old, you know, oh, 6-pack in 4 weeks situation? Or is it something a little bit different? If it's something a little bit different, how can I refine that? How can I make it clearer? How can I, because at the end of the day, a client visiting your page wants to know how it benefits them, how it fits into their story in a more like theoretical perspective, but more like bricks and like more just clearly, how does this benefit me? What results do I get from this? Like that's the blunt
what's
end
in it for me.
And then the more complex end is like how, you know, the subtle ways that you make that make sense to them. There's so many things that you don't notice until there's so many things that you don't notice about something good until something bad comes along and you notice that none of those things are there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Like what would a bad version of this look like? How do I not do that?
Like, for example, just a great apartment with a great bathroom, but there's nowhere to hang your towels. Like, just awful. Imagine that. What a mare. And
have you got nowhere to hang your towels, Alex?
Yeah, exactly. No, I've got, there's a hook on the door. There's a towel rail. It's great here. But it's, but just stuff like that, because I think not knowing where things are going missing is a mistake that a lot of people make starting out, because it feels like such a large undertaking that you can get scattered in terms of your focus. So taking a step back and being like, oh, I don't know who Alex is, for example. So say I'm trying to run a business. I don't know who Alex is. I've encountered him through Instagram. So you could do it different ways, but like just try and lead yourself through their experience, because so many people will like even have a nice angle, even have a nice way of storytelling, but then they don't even tell you what they do. Like they don't even state clearly, I run this 6-week program to help people achieve this. Like, that's fine to say that. That's not like, oh, you have to be really subtle about it. It's more about the way that people arrive at that offer. But if that offer's not even there, like I saw a profile of some guy who like really good stories, really good engagement. And there was like, okay, how do I work with you? Like the idea that you should like put a barrier up to people to work with you is dumb. It needs to be as easy as possible for someone to opt in to your world. And that can be gently. So for example, the 14-day challenge is no paid offering. It's very much delivering a lot of value up front. But that makes the barrier to entry a lot smoother. Like, I mean, that's why club promoters exist. It's not because the clubs make the money off someone just going in the actual building. It's because once they're in the building, they buy drinks. And it's the same process that you need to kind of think about with your thing. You need to get people in the building, but then in the building, you need to surprise them even more. Like, you know, the ideal experience with anything. So this apartment's like an Airbnb, basically. The pictures on the website look really good. And then when I walked in, it was much bigger than I was hoping for. And that's like, whoa, that experience, if you can replicate that for potential personal training clients, you're fine. You're absolutely fine. That's what you want. You want people to be like, wow, this is really thorough. Now, that doesn't mean you undersell what you're putting out there, but it's a way of like provide a lot of value up front, then it's an over deliver kind of situation. That basically that.
And well, then you think, well, like, what does that look like? Well, if someone's selling super high ticket for like one-to-one email access, that's the same as like you putting 10 grand down for the apartment and then there being nowhere to hang your towels.
Yes.
You know, it's like you've got all these expectations and it ends up not, versus if it was a tenth of the price you're expecting, but there's like an entire rack for your towels and there's a, you know, it's bigger than you're expecting.
Yeah.
It's like, so it probably looks like I'm not just relying on you to email me. I'm part of a community. I can get on-demand support. There's content. I can get my questions answered without having to wait for anybody. It's very predictable and repeatable, and it's in line with my expectations. And it's not like the first thing I look to cancel if I'm looking to trim my budget down a little bit that month.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So, and that you know, does that sound like a good service? Yeah, most people would be pretty happy with that. So it's like, well, how do I make that? And the answer is just go to propanefitness.com/business podcast.
Exactly.
No, I'm joking. But, you know, the answer is generally like, that's how we arrived at group coaching. That's how we arrived at the 14-day challenge. It's like, what does a good sales experience look like? Just gives people all the information they need and then says, if you'd like to continue, there's the till.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than, I've got a knife, come to the till. If you don't pay, then
exactly. Like
I'm going to murk you.
Murk you. Exactly. Exactly. No, it's but I think so. I find it personally a lot. So some people might struggle with for example, the nightclub metaphor or whatever metaphor, but thinking about it in a physical space can be really good for helping with the abstract of like social media and the internet as like a vast world. Like you really are building kind of, not a shop, but you're almost building your own online gym, sort of. There's a sort of to that, where the personal side of things is a lot more valued than than just being a brick building. You don't necessarily care who's working inside as long as the service is fine. It's a bit different online. But in terms of like the mechanics of how things work and how attracting people works, I mean, understanding so customer journey, how you fit into their story, and how you're telling your own story, and the way you can do that in the most authentic, the least pushy, the least salesy. People's barriers are just up to it now. I think this is another problem. I think a lot of people that are business gurus, they had a lot of like first mover advantage with this stuff, where like, because no one was providing the service, they just did it and it worked because there was a need for it. And they think that their hypey marketing was what worked, but the market has changed now. It's very sensitive to that stuff. It's, people are, unless you're already an authority in an industry, in fitness, so in other industries, maybe not, but unless you can create so like Wim Hof, for example, created a new fucking methodology. Like, that's just a story. About breathing. Exactly.
Like I've been breathing for ages. And he told me I was doing it wrong.
He created a problem that I didn't know I had. But that's, anyway, from a scientist perspective, that's wild. But unless you're doing something and you really are offering a new science or a new whatever, then your only advantage is your authentic experience and who you are as a person, and a very specific value that you can bring to someone. Because why would I not just work with Joe Wicks?
Loads of reasons.
Loads.
But like it's weird that we're in an industry where the people that we're selling to already know that they want the thing that you have, and yet people struggle to sell it.
Yeah.
There's not a demand problem, really. It's just a blockage in the way of, I'm not really sure about you, generally speaking. Like, I'm not really sure where to go.
It's because there's too many people flapping their menu being like,
garlic bread,
pasta, let's go. Too much of that. And like that, and that is it's just part of the fitness market, is that it's unbelievably crowded compared to some more niche stuff, which is why you need the niche and why you need to tell your story in a way that isn't generic. You're just going to get lost in the sludge if you do it generically. If you can't speak to the people you're trying to serve in a way that makes them sit up and go, and when I say the people you're trying to serve, like 30 out of 10 million, So not like, not 10 million of the people you're trying to serve. Again, it's really, that's where the real power of the online thing is. It's so many more people that you don't even understand how many more people it is. Like the brain can't comprehend of like, oh, that's so tiny. That's such a small amount.
Well, the example I use to it with like audience sizes is if you think of a full sports stadium,
Yeah.
for most people, that's like the biggest volume of people they can think of. I wouldn't even turn a Facebook ad on for an audience that small.
Yeah.
You know, like that, there's literally no point. So that, like, when you put that in context, you're like, right, okay, the internet and the market here is huge.
Yeah.
And as you said, beyond comprehension. But just to circle back to the hypey tactics thing, I think, so we get asked, like, why is our marketing approach for Propane Business different to what we teach in Propane Business and different to what works in Propane Fitness?
Yeah.
And it's just because, and this is, I think, the thing, when people have worked with a coach and they've been taught to do like a webinar to a sales call to a one-to-one coaching, like that works to business owners.
Yeah.
Because they understand intrinsically, like, well, the presentation is valuable. I'm going to learn something about how to build my business.
Yeah.
The phone call, well, I can't, I have to chat to, like, this is a business here. There's a lot going on. It makes sense to speak to someone and discuss that with them. If I'm just like working my 9-to-5 job and I kind of want to lose a bit of weight for summer, and suddenly I've got to sit down and watch like a 60-minute video and then speak and then have a call with someone, like, I just want a weight loss program.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really make sense. So the markets are also so different.
Yeah.
And like everyone's had, business owners more so now, but certainly in the fitness industry, everyone's familiar with like the bullshit, right? The weight loss powder that didn't work, the supplement that promised me massive arms that never happened, the weight loss powder that like was going to be the thing that got me abs that never worked. Like people are so used to this cyclical disappointment.
Yeah.
Massive promise, under delivery, massive promise, under delivery, that there's a natural skepticism. Yeah. So when people see big claim followed by a sales call, they think, I want no part of that.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why the 14-day challenge comparably is so like gentle and honest as a tactic. It's just like, look, let me just explain it to you. And if you're interested, great. If not, no problem.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, something I was just going to mention, which is completely unrelated, unless you've got anything else you want to say on this.
No.
To wrap up, no. Was I once witnessed in a supermarket a man go to a self-service checkout with a Snickers bar, and it was like, I don't know, like 60p or something. I can't remember the price, but he basically paid up to 1 penny short of the price, and then got the checkout assistant over and said, like, I've got the penny, but I'm not planning to pay the penny. What are you going to do about that? I was like, part of me thinking like, what a dick. Like, but the other half is like, I am interested to know what the lady's going to do. So she was like, well, that's stealing. I'm going to have to call the police. He's like, really though? You're going to call the police, and then when they arrive, you're going to say it's because of a penny? She was like, yeah, I'm going to have to. And this back and forth went on for ages. Just like, that's either like a guy doing a documentary or writing like a social experiments book, or just a prick. One of the, but like, it's an interesting, that like thinking about price is really arbitrary, isn't it? Because he's 1 penny shy. He's basically paid for the Snickers, but he's also not. But that's probably another topic for another day. But I just wanted to say that before we wrapped up, because I thought about that and I was like, man, that was such a weird thing. But yeah, so go ahead.
No, that's absolutely insane. Like what?
Weird.
Oh yeah, and that is something that I think that online does expose you to some weird people, and you're just going to have to take that as part of the client you might attract.
Yeah.
There might
it definitely does.
If you try and pay 59p for a 60p Snickers.
Well, the nice thing about online is the price is the price.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to deal with any cash.
And you just don't ignore them as well. Like they're not even there physically. That's another great point. Like, right then.
Well, you can't. You just can't pay, can you? Yeah. Someone can't come up to you with like a £5 note and say, "I know it's 10 quid, but here's 5."
Exactly.
Like, well, don't even know they're there. Alex, this has been awesome.
Been great.
One awesome introduction.
Yes.
To the world of the Propane Business podcast. Normally I'd say at this point, if someone wants to find out more about you, where would they go? But I
Propane
think people know
Business.
the answer. Propane Business.
Yeah.
If you want like full access to Alex, the easiest thing to do is just join the Propane Business program.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's not that difficult,
work on
really.
your story and how you present into the world and make it compelling so that you actually resonate with people as opposed to disappear in the sludge of people waving their menus and saying pasta and garlic.
Just less garlic bread. No one wants a garlic bread problem, do they?
Although actually garlic bread marketing in fitness might work. Just saying, you know, that's the thing. Steal from other industries. That is actually a good thing. So the lessons you should be learning, don't steal them from the fitness industry because you will run into bias of trying to copy what successful fitness people are doing, which is you'll get lost in the fact that their story that they tell is probably very different to the one that you tell. If you can get different eyes on a different market and how they're working and delivering online coaching, you're not going to end up copying like, here's how you work on IT skills, but you might be able to see a bit clearer the kind of mechanics of the customer journey and what's appealing to them.
Great point. Yeah, great point. I think like look at other service-based businesses online, ones that are doing really, really well, and how they're selling themselves and how they're coming across differently. And like, that's such an easy way to get an edge because so many personal trainers are copying. Like, I don't know how many James Smith lookalikes I've seen since he started. It's insane. And like,
exactly. Strangely, that's the no bullshit. So the zag to the zig of everything will solve itself in 4 weeks, we're zagging more towards it has to be evidence, but it's fascinating.
It's just the way that everyone thinks they have to zag is by like doing a video in which it's the first time they've ever sworn on the internet, and it's, you know, there has to be, you've got to be really deliberately polarizing for the sake of it.
Let's do some fucking sit-ups.
Fuck off. Yeah. It's jarring. But so that's an example of like, it worked for James because he was just himself. He just pressed record in a video. He just said what he was thinking. And a percentage of the market hate him, but enough love him that he's got a book deal and he's been on morning, whatever it was.
Good morning.
He wasn't on BBC Breakfast.
Good morning, the morning.
Good morning, the morning.
The morning show.
The morning show. But yeah.
And also, you don't need to write a book to be a full-time personal trainer online. You don't need to be James Smith to be full-time. You really only need a very, we have a literal freedom calculator to help you work this out in terms of how many clients you need online to go full-time. And
it's almost always fewer than you think, isn't it?
It's almost fewer than you think. And it's almost like, well, it's the whole, so this is, we can talk about this at a different time actually. So, but the 100K Fit Pro idea.
The 100K club. Yeah, fine. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that on another podcast. So if you want to think, my opinions on that, then I'll speak.
You'll have to wait.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll have to wait.
Join the program and I'll tell you in there.
What an open loop. What to do. You've only got two options. Seriously though, if you would like to join the Propane Business program, you can even speak to Alex if you prefer to.
Yes. And we can talk about your niche, about your brand, about how you're telling your story. I'll look at your website if you want before we chat and take you through some of the kind of tips and tactics that I'd give you based on what you're putting out there. Yep.
So 2 ways to do that. One of them, send us an email. The way to get VIP queue jump, like you don't even need to go via the promoter. This is me giving you a virtual leaflet to get like 2-for-1 sambucas at the bar, is send us an email with the subject line Propane Business Podcast. We'll bump you to the front of the queue, or just go to propanefitness.com/business podcast. And there's basically a free, basically everything we could possibly give away for free without fully revealing the secrets, all the special secrets is in that training. Yeah. So you can go there or send us an email. Either's fine. And if you'd like to speak to Alex, just let us know.
All right.
And he'll try and squeeze you in.
Oh, well. See you, Johnny.
See ya.